A wealthy man awoke from a coma and overheard his wife talking to her lover. She was discussing taking all the inheritance after his death, and Nathan Blackwood woke to the soft sound of his smartphone's alarm in the grand master bedroom of his Boston mansion. Opening his eyes, he gazed at the high ceiling above. Beside him, his young 25-year-old wife, Evelyn, was still deep in sleep. He quietly got up, slipped into his silk robe, and walked out to the balcony. The rising sun painted the city skyline in golden hues. At 45, Nathan was a top name in the East Coast real estate market. As he sipped coffee prepared by his personal chef, Nathan browsed the news on his tablet. Another of his projects was making headlines, promising to transform Boston's skyline. He was eager to share this with Evelyn. "Good morning, dear," Evelyn said as she entered the kitchen with a radiant smile, giving Nathan a quick kiss. "Good morning, my love," he replied, admiring his young wife's beauty. But briefly, the image of Nicole, his ex-wife, flashed through his mind. Nathan shook his head, dismissing the memory. That was the past. He had a new life now. Later, in his penthouse office, Nathan found himself staring at a photo on his desk of him, Nicole, and their children, Emily and Matthew, from a beach trip years ago. They all looked happy. Guilt pricked him as he remembered leaving it all behind for Evelyn. His phone rang, breaking his thoughts. It was his assistant, about an urgent last-minute meeting. "Evelyn, dear," Nathan called out, "I need to leave for an urgent meeting." Evelyn appeared at the door, her face showing slight irritation. "But Nathan, you promised we'd spend the day together." I know. But this is really important." "I'll make it up to you later," he said, giving her a quick kiss before leaving. In the elevator, Nathan couldn't help but notice how distant Evelyn had seemed lately. Was the shine of their new marriage fading? He got into his luxury sports car. Driving through Boston, Nathan reflected on his life. He had everything he wanted: success, money, a beautiful wife. So why did he sometimes feel so empty? His phone rang again. It was Emily. Nathan hesitated, then decided to ignore the call. He didn't know what to say after so long. Arriving at the meeting, he parked and took a deep breath. It was time to focus on business. That's how he built his empire. But as he walked towards the building, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, his empire was built on sand. Nathan rushed out of the building after the meeting. The sun was setting, painting Boston's sky in shades of orange and pink. He glanced at his watch and muttered a curse under his breath. He was late for dinner with Evelyn. As he drove through the busy city streets, his phone rang. It was Evelyn. Nathan hesitated, then answered on speaker. "Hi, dear," he tried to sound cheerful. "Where are you, Nathan?" Evelyn's voice was cold and irritated. "Dinner is getting cold." "Sorry, love. The meeting ran longer than expected." "I'm on my way." "You're always on your way, Nathan," Evelyn sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if you really want to be at home." Her words hit him like a punch in the stomach. "Evelyn, that's not fair. You know how hard I work to give us the life we have." "The life you think I want, you mean," she retorted. "Maybe I just want a husband who is present." The argument escalated as Nathan drove faster, his frustration mirroring the pressure on the accelerator. "Look, let's talk when I get home, okay?" he said, trying to end the argument. "Sure, if you get home," Evelyn replied bitterly before hanging up. Nathan tossed his phone onto the passenger seat, anger bubbling inside him. Why couldn't she understand? He was doing all this for them, for their future. Lost in his turbulent thoughts, Nathan didn't notice the red light ahead. When he finally did, it was too late. He slammed on the brakes, but the car skidded on the wet pavement. Time seemed to slow down. Nathan saw the truck approaching from the right, heard the blaring horn, felt the violent impact that shook his entire body. The world spun around him. Metal twisted, glass shattered. Nathan felt a sharp pain in his head before everything went dark. Sirens. Distant voices. Flashing lights. Nathan floated in a sea of fragmented consciousness. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? A female voice tried to reach him through the fog. Nathan tried to respond, but no sound came out. He couldn't move, couldn't open his eyes. Panic began to set in. He's losing a lot of blood. Another voice, more urgent. Blood pressure dropping. We need to get him to the hospital now. Nathan felt himself being moved, lifted. The pain was unbearable. He wanted to scream, but his body wouldn't respond. In the depths of his mind, images began to flash. Evelyn, Nicole, Emily, Matthew, his parents, his entire life passing before his closed eyes. Hang in there, sir. We're almost at the hospital. Hospital. The word echoed in his mind. Was he going to die? There was so much he still wanted to do, so much he needed to fix. The sirens grew louder, closer. Nathan felt the vehicle stop abruptly. More movement. More voices. Male, 45 years old, collision victim. Severe cranial trauma, possible internal injuries. The voices blended, growing more distant. Nathan struggled to cling to consciousness, but he was losing the battle. The last thing he heard before plunging into total darkness was a doctor's voice. Prepare the surgery room. It's a race against time. Then, silence. Nathan Blackwood, the powerful real estate magnate, the man who thought he had everything under control, was now completely at the mercy of fate. In the hospital corridor, doctors and nurses rushed back and forth. A young nurse picked up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the emergency contact number. Hello? Mrs. Blackwood? This is from Boston General Hospital. It's about your husband. The hospital room was silent except for the constant beeping of the machines. Nathan Blackwood lay motionless on the bed, tubes and wires connected to his body. His usually confident face was now pale and expressionless. Evelyn sat beside the bed, her eyes red and swollen from crying, or at least that's what she wanted the nurses to believe. In truth, she had barely shed a tear since hearing of the accident. Oh, Nathan, she whispered, holding his hand for the benefit of a nurse who had just entered. Please wake up. I need you. As soon as the nurse left, Evelyn released Nathan's hand and grabbed her phone. Her fingers flew over the screen, typing a message. He's still in a coma. The doctors don't know when or if he will wake up. We need to talk. The reply came almost instantly. Meet me at the cafe across the street in 10 minutes. J. Evelyn glanced at Nathan one more time, making sure no one was around, and hurried out of the room. At the cafe, Jake was already waiting, an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. He was younger than Nathan, with dark hair and piercing eyes. When he saw Evelyn, he stood to embrace her. How are you holding up, dear? Jake asked, his voice full of feigned concern. Evelyn shrugged. I'm managing. The hard part is keeping up appearances. Everyone expects me to be the devastated wife. Jake smiled, a hint of malice in his eyes. Well, technically, you are his wife. For now, Evelyn responded with an equally mischievous smile. But if he doesn't wake up, then everything we've planned will finally come to fruition, Jake finished. They continued their conversation in hushed tones, discussing plans and possibilities, oblivious to the drama unfolding across the street. Back at the hospital, a middle-aged woman hesitantly entered Nathan's room. Nicole, Nathan's ex-wife, looked as if she had aged years since the accident. Her eyes, filled with genuine concern, scanned Nathan's motionless form. Oh, Nate, she whispered, using the nickname she hadn't used in years. What have you done to yourself? Nicole approached the bed, gently touching Nathan's face. Despite all the pain he had caused her, seeing him like this broke her heart. Mom? A soft voice came from the door. Emily, the 19-year-old daughter of Nathan and Nicole, was there, her eyes red from crying. Behind her, Matthew, 17, looked uncomfortable and upset. "Come in, kids," Nicole said softly. "Come see your father." Emily approached timidly, while Matthew stood by the door, arms crossed defensively. "He looks so fragile," Emily murmured, taking her father's hand. "He didn't care how fragile we were when he left us," Matthew said bitterly. Nicole shot a warning glance at her son. "Matthew, now is not the time for that." "Then when is the time, Mom?" Matthew retorted. "When he wakes up and abandons us again?" The sound of heels in the hallway interrupted their discussion. Evelyn entered the room, looking surprised to see the family there. "Oh, I didn't know you were here," she said, her voice cold. Nicole straightened up, her eyes meeting Evelyn's. The contrast between the two women couldn't be more stark. Nicole, with her expression lines and graying hair, was the image of enduring, suffered love. Evelyn, young and flawless, was like a porcelain doll, beautiful but cold. "We are his family," Nicole stated simply. Evelyn forced a smile. "Of course. Well, I'm sure Nathan would be happy to know you came." The ensuing silence was heavy, filled with unspoken words and repressed emotions. Emily continued holding her father's hand, silent tears rolling down her face. Matthew stared out the window, refusing to look at Evelyn or the unconscious Nathan. Nicole remained by the bed, her gaze shifting between Nathan and her children, as if still trying to protect them even now. And Evelyn. Evelyn watched it all with calculating eyes, her mind already scheming how to use this situation to her advantage. As Nathan's family grappled with their pain and resentment, and Evelyn plotted her next move, Nathan remained oblivious to it all, trapped in a deep sleep from which no one knew when or if he would awaken. Days at the hospital dragged on in a monotonous rhythm, marked only by the constant beeping of machines and the silent comings and goings of nurses. Nathan Blackwood remained motionless in his bed, seemingly oblivious to the world around him. But deep within his mind, a silent battle was being waged. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Nathan began to emerge from the shadows of unconsciousness. At first, it was just fragments, a sound here, a sensation there. Gradually, these fragments began to coalesce into a hazy but growing consciousness. He could hear voices, though he couldn't fully decipher the words. It was like listening to a conversation underwater, distorted and muffled. Nathan struggled to understand, to respond, but his body refused to obey his mind's commands. In this state of partial awareness, Nathan began to pick up snippets of conversations around him. Evelyn's voice, his young wife, was the most frequent. But there was something off about her tone, something that didn't match her words of concern. "Jake, darling," he heard her whisper into her phone one night, thinking she was alone in the room. "Things are progressing as planned. The doctors say his chances of waking up decrease every day." Nathan felt a twinge of confusion and pain. Jake? Who was Jake? And why was Evelyn talking about his chances of waking up in that manner? Nicole's visits were different. Her voice was soft, laden with an emotion Nathan couldn't name. "Hi, Nate," she would say, holding his hand. "The doctors say talking to you might help. So here I am, talking. The kids are okay. Emily's in college now, did you know? And Matthew, well, he's still angry, but he cares about you, even if he won't admit it." Nicole's words were like a bomb to Nathan's confused soul. He wanted to respond, to say he could hear her, but his body remained stubbornly still. Emily and Matthew also came. His daughter's voice trembling as she read him her favorite poems, his son grudgingly mumbling about his football games. Each visit was a bittersweet mix of comfort and frustration for Nathan. It was during one of these visits that he first heard the voice of Claire, the nurse taking care of him. "Mr. Blackwood," she said gently as she adjusted his pillows, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I want you to know that we're all rooting for you. There's so much life waiting for you out there." Something about Claire's voice touched Nathan. It was gentle, yet firm. Professional, yet caring. He clung to that voice like an anchor in the sea of confusion he found himself in. As the days passed, Nathan fought harder and harder to make himself heard, to make himself understood. He could feel his body beginning to respond, though in almost imperceptible ways. A finger that moved slightly, an eyelid that twitched. Claire was the first to notice these subtle changes. "Mr. Blackwood," she asked one day, leaning over him, "can you hear me? If you can, try to move your index finger." Nathan concentrated all his strength on that simple action. Slowly, painfully, his finger moved. It was just a millimeter, but for Nathan, it was like moving a mountain. Claire's face lit up. "That's it, Mr. Blackwood. You're making great progress." In that moment, Nathan felt a spark of hope. He was coming back. Slowly, yes, but he was coming back. And with that return came a fierce determination. He would find out the truth about Evelyn and Jake. He would fix things with Nicole and his children. Nathan Blackwood was far from fully awake, but he was more conscious than ever. And he was ready to fight for his future. Dawn brought new clarity to Nathan Blackwood. His eyes remained closed, his body motionless, but his mind was more alert than ever. After weeks of foggy consciousness, Nathan had finally regained full control of his thoughts. Yet, he made a crucial decision. He would continue to pretend to be in a coma. The familiar sound of high heels echoed down the hallway. Evelyn entered the room, closing the door softly behind her. Nathan smelled the expensive perfume of his wife as she approached the bed. "Jake, you won't believe it," Evelyn whispered into the phone. The lawyer called. "If Nathan doesn't wake up in the next few days, we can start the process to take over the business." Nathan's heart raced, but he kept his breathing steady, his expression unchanged. "Yes, love," Evelyn continued, her voice barely containing the excitement. "Think of everything we can do with that money. Travel the world, buy that island we always wanted." Nathan fought the urge to open his eyes, to confront Evelyn right then and there. But he knew he needed more information, needed to fully understand the extent of the betrayal. "Don't worry about his ex-wife and kids," Evelyn laughed softly. "They have no claim to anything. Nathan took care of that when he married me." The conversation continued for a few minutes, each word stabbing Nathan's heart. When Evelyn finally hung up and left the room, he felt a toxic mix of anger, sadness, and regret bubbling within him. Hours later, the door opened again. This time, it was Nicole. Nathan smelled the familiar scent of lavender he always associated with her. "Hi, Nate," Nicole said softly, sitting beside the bed. "I brought some photos today. Thought you might like to see how the kids are." Nathan heard the rustling of papers as Nicole described each photo. Emily's graduation, Matthew in his soccer uniform. Precious moments he had missed. "You know, Nate," Nicole continued, her voice choked up. "Despite everything, I never stopped loving you. I know I made mistakes too, that I wasn't always the wife you needed. But I'd give anything to go back in time, to do things differently." A tear escaped Nathan's eye, rolling silently down his cheek. Nicole noticed it, wiping it away gently with her thumb. "Nate," she asked, hope tinting her voice, "can you hear me?" Nathan fought against the overwhelming desire to open his eyes, to tell Nicole how sorry he was. But he knew it wasn't time yet. Claire, the nurse, entered the room to check Nathan's vitals. She noticed a dry tear on his face and frowned, glancing from Nathan to the monitors. "Mrs. Blackwood," Claire said cautiously, "have you noticed any changes in Mr. Blackwood today?" Nicole hesitated. I'm not sure. For a moment, I thought." Claire nodded, her eyes studying Nathan's face intently. "I'll inform the doctor. We might be seeing signs of improvement." Once alone again, Nathan delved into deep reflections. How had he reached this point? Where had he gone so drastically wrong? He remembered his unbridled ambition, how he always put work and money above everything. He thought of Nicole, how he had neglected her over the years. Of his children, who grew up without their father's presence. And of Evelyn, the young and beautiful woman he thought would be his second chance, but who turned out to be his downfall. Nathan realized he had a choice to make. He could continue being the man he was, obsessed with power and wealth, Or he could use this second chance to become someone better, someone worthy of his family's love. With this resolution in mind, Nathan began to plan his next move. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with painful confrontations and bitter truths. But for the first time in a long time, Nathan Blackwood was ready to face the consequences of his actions and fight for what truly mattered. The moment Nathan Blackwood had been waiting for finally arrived. He heard Evelyn enter the room, her expensive perfume announcing her presence before she even spoke. "Oh, dear," Evelyn sighed, sitting beside the bed. "If only you could see how much your business needs you." Nathan slowly opened his eyes, focusing on the face of his young wife. "Not as much as you need my money, right, Evelyn?" The shock on Evelyn's face was palpable. She stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "Nathan, you're awake." For some time, Nathan replied, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Long enough to hear about you and Jake, and your plans for my fortune." Evelyn paled, but quickly recomposed herself. "Dear, you must be confused. The coma, the medications. You don't know what you're saying." Nathan struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain in his atrophied muscles. "Don't try to manipulate me, Evelyn. I heard everything. Every word, every plan." Tears began to form in Evelyn's eyes. "Nathan, please. You don't understand. I love you. Everything I did was for us." "For us?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "Or for you and Jake?" At that moment, the door to the room opened. A young and attractive man entered, stopping abruptly upon seeing Nathan awake. "Jake," Nathan said, his voice laden with irony. "Glad you could join us. We were just discussing how you and my dear wife plan to spend my money." Jake looked at Evelyn, panic in his eyes. "Ev, what's happening?" "Nothing's happening," Evelyn responded quickly, trying to control the situation. "Nathan just woke up. He's confused." "Confused enough to remember every detail of your phone conversations?" Nathan countered. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with tension. It was broken by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Nicole entered the room, stopping at the door upon seeing the scene before her. "Nate," she called hesitantly. "You're awake?" Nathan felt his heart tighten at the sight of Nicole. "Yes, I am," he responded softly. Evelyn, realizing she was losing control of the situation, tried one last gambit. "Nathan, dear, you need to rest. All this excitement isn't good for you." "The only thing that's not good for me is you, Evelyn," Nathan replied coldly. "I want you and your lover out of this room. Now." With one last look of desperation, Evelyn grabbed Jake's hand and quickly exited the room, leaving Nathan and Nicole alone. "Nicole," Nathan called, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. For everything." Nicole slowly approached the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Nate. I was a fool," Nathan continued. "I threw away what really mattered for nothing." Nicole took Nathan's hand, squeezing it gently. "You're here now. That's what matters." For several minutes, they sat in silence, years of hurts and regrets hanging between them. Finally, Nathan spoke again. "Nicole, I need to see the kids. Please." Nicole nodded, wiping away her tears. "I'll call them right now." As Nicole stepped out to make the call, Nathan closed his eyes, exhausted yet determined. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. Confronting Evelyn and Jake was just the beginning. He had a lot to explain, a lot to make right. But for the first time in years, Nathan Blackwood felt hope. Hope for redemption, for a second chance with his true family. And he was determined not to waste this opportunity. The sound of Nicole returning to the room brought him back to the present. "They're on their way," she said softly. Nathan nodded, bracing himself for what would undoubtedly be the most important meeting of his life. It was time to face his children, to begin the long process of healing and reconciliation. And with Nicole by his side, Nathan felt that, perhaps, just perhaps, he might be able to mend what had been broken so long ago. The air in the hospital room was charged with tension as Emily and Matthew entered. Nathan's heart raced as he saw his children, now almost adults, hesitating at the door. "Dad?" Emily called softly, her eyes wide with surprise and emotion. Matthew, on the other hand, maintained a closed expression, his arms defensively crossed over his chest. "Emily, Matthew," Nathan said, his voice choked up. "Thank you for coming." Emily approached the bed, tears shimmering in her eyes. Matthew remained where he was, observing the scene with a hard gaze. "I know it's been a long time," Nathan began, "and I have a lot to explain." The words triggered a flood of memories. Nathan found himself reliving past moments, Emily's 10th birthday when he promised to be there, but was stuck in a business meeting, Matthew's first soccer game as a starter, which he missed due to a last-minute trip. "Remember when I promised to take you camping that summer?" Nathan asked, the guilt evident in his voice. "I had everything planned, but then that big deal came up and you canceled, as always," Matthew interrupted, his voice laden with bitterness. "We don't need a recap of your failures as a father." Emily shot a warning glance at her brother. "Matt, please." Nathan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of years of neglect. "You have every right to be angry. I failed you, many times. I prioritized things I thought were important at the time, but now I see they meant nothing compared to you. Isn't it a bit late to realize that?" Matthew countered. "I know," Nathan replied, meeting his son's angry gaze. "But I'm asking for a chance. A chance to make things right, to be the father you deserve." Emily took her father's hand, squeezing it gently. "Dad, what happened? Why decide this now?" Nathan sighed, preparing to reveal the painful truth. "The accident, it made me see things from a different perspective. And during the coma, I heard things. I found out that Evelyn..." At that moment, the door swung open abruptly. Evelyn entered, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Oh dear, you shouldn't tire yourself like this," she said, casting a cold glance at Emily and Matthew. "Perhaps it's better if the kids come back another day." "We're not kids," Matthew growled. "And you have no right to tell us when we can see our dad." Nathan felt the tension in the room increase. "Evelyn, please leave. I'm trying to have an important conversation with my children." Evelyn hesitated, clearly not expecting this reaction. "But Nathan, dear." "Now, Evelyn," Nathan said firmly. With one last look of defiance, Evelyn left the room, slamming the door behind her. "Sorry about that," Nathan said, turning his attention back to his children. "As I was saying, I discovered some things about Evelyn during the coma. She's not who I thought she was." Emily frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Nathan took a deep breath. "She was planning, well, she was with another man, hoping I wouldn't wake up so she could take my money." Matthew let out a bitter laugh. "Of course. You always did know how to pick them, Dad." "Matt." Emily scolded, but Nathan raised his hand. "No, he's right. I've made many mistakes. But I'm determined to fix them if you'll give me the chance." Emily looked at her father, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and caution. "I think everyone deserves a second chance." Matthew, however, seemed unconvinced. "Words are easy, Dad. You've let us down too many times before." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of his son's words. "I know, Matthew. And I understand your distrust. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. Just a chance to prove, through actions, that I've changed." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions and years of grievances. Emily still held her father's hand, offering a small smile of encouragement. Matthew, though still visibly angry, seemed to be considering his father's words. "It won't be easy," Nathan continued. "I know I have a lot to make up for. But if you're willing, I'd like to try. For real, this time." Emily looked at her brother, a silent question in her eyes. Matthew sighed deeply. "Let's see," he finally said. "But I'm not promising anything." Nathan felt a small ray of hope. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. A start to rebuilding the bridges he had burned so long ago. "Thank you," he said softly. That's all I ask. Nathan Blackwood's lawyer's office was quiet except for the soft scratching of a pen on paper. Nathan, still pale from his hospital stay but with determination in his eyes, signed the divorce papers. Are you sure about this, Mr. Blackwood? The lawyer asked, watching his client carefully. Nathan nodded, his expression grave. Absolutely. It's time to correct my mistakes, starting with this one. Unbeknownst to Nathan, as he took this decisive step, the story of his betrayal and miraculous recovery was already leaking to the press. Within hours, sensational headlines splashed across newspapers and news websites. Real estate mogul awakens from coma to discover wife's betrayal. The bitter awakening, Nathan Blackwood faces family scandal. Nathan's phone was ringing nonstop. Reporters, business partners, even old friends who hadn't spoken to him in a long time all wanted to know the truth behind the headlines. At a hastily organized press conference, Nathan faced the cameras, looking tired but resolute. Yes, it's true that I am divorcing Evelyn Blackwood, he confirmed, his voice firm. During my coma, I discovered her infidelity and her plans for my estate. But this situation made me realize my own mistakes and the people who truly matter in my life. Meanwhile, at the Blackwood mansion, Evelyn watched the broadcast, her face a mask of shock and rage. Beside her, suitcases were already packed. How dare he, she hissed, throwing a vase at the television. After everything I did for him. Jake, sitting on the couch, looked uncomfortable. Ev, maybe we should leave. Things are getting too complicated. Evelyn turned to him, her eyes blazing with fury. Leave? With nothing? No, Jake. I'll fight for what's mine. But her words fell on deaf ears. Jake was already standing, grabbing his suitcase. Sorry, Evelyn. This isn't what I signed up for. Good luck. Stunned, Evelyn watched as Jake walked out the door, leaving her alone in the vast mansion that would soon no longer be her home. Hours later, Nathan arrived at the mansion, accompanied by his lawyer and a court officer. Evelyn awaited them in the living room, her posture stiff, but her eyes red from crying. I've come to collect some things and ensure you leave the property as ordered by the court, Nathan said, his voice neutral. Evelyn stared at him, a mix of anger and despair in her eyes. You can't do this to me, Nathan. I'm your wife. Was, Evelyn. You were my wife, Nathan replied, weariness evident in his voice. Please, don't make this harder than it already is. As Evelyn reluctantly gathered her belongings, Nathan walked through the rooms of the mansion. Each object, each room brought back memories, some good, many bitter. It was the end of a chapter in his life, a chapter he now realized had been built on lies and self-deception. When Evelyn finally left, dragging her designer suitcases, Nathan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. But with that relief also came the harsh reality of the consequences of his choices. His phone rang. It was his accountant. Mr. Blackwood, we need to talk about the impact of this scandal on your business. Several investors are nervous, and some partnerships are being reconsidered. Nathan sighed. Understood. Schedule a meeting for tomorrow. We'll face this head-on. Hanging up the phone, Nathan found himself alone in the vast mansion. The silence was deafening. He walked over to the bar, his hand hovering over a bottle of whiskey. For a moment, the temptation to drown his worries in alcohol was strong. But then, his eyes fell on a photo on the shelf. It was him with Nicole and the kids, years ago. Everyone smiling, happy. Nathan picked up the photo, a sad smile playing on his lips. He put the empty glass back on the bar. No, he would not repeat the mistakes of the past. He had people to fight for now, a chance at redemption. Nathan picked up his phone again, dialing a familiar number. Nicole? Hi. It's me. I just wanted to hear your voice. Things are complicated here, but I'm doing what's right. Finally. As he talked with Nicole, Nathan felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead would be difficult, he knew. His reputation, his business, his life, everything was in turmoil. But for the first time in a long time, Nathan Blackwood was facing the truth head-on. And as painful as it was, he knew it was the first step towards a better life, a genuine life. Looking out the window at the sunset, Nathan made a silent promise to himself and to those he loved. He would fix things, no matter the cost. The price of truth was high, but the reward, a chance at redemption and true love, was worth every penny. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our moving stories. Share it with your friends so they can be moved too, and in the comments, tell us what you thought. We want to know your opinion and suggestions to continue bringing content that touches the heart. Nathan shifted uncomfortably in the leather armchair in Dr. Simmons' office. It was his third therapy session, and he still felt odd discussing his feelings. "How do you feel about the progress you've made so far, Nathan?" asked Dr. Simmons, her gaze attentive and compassionate. Nathan sighed. "It's hard. Looking back and seeing all the mistakes I've made, all the people I've hurt. Sometimes I wonder if I really deserve a second chance." "Regret is an important step," the therapist replied. "But remember, the goal isn't to punish yourself forever, but to learn and grow." Dr. Simmons' words echoed in Nathan's mind as he drove to meet Emily for lunch. His daughter had been more receptive to his attempts at reconnection, unlike Matthew, who still kept his distance. Emily was already seated at the restaurant when Nathan arrived. She smiled shyly, and Nathan felt his heart warm. "Hi, Dad," she said, standing up for a hesitant hug. "Hi, honey," Nathan responded, savoring the moment. "How are your classes going?" As they talked about Emily's college experiences and her plans for the future, Nathan marveled at the young woman his daughter had become. There was so much he had missed, but he was determined to be present from here on out. "Emily," he said during a pause in the conversation, "I know we're still reconnecting, but do you think Matthew would agree to meet me too?" Emily bit her lip, thoughtful. "He's still hurt, Dad. But I'll talk to him. Maybe if it's something casual, like a basketball game." Nathan nodded, grateful for the suggestion. "Thank you, dear. That means a lot to me." After lunch, Nathan stopped by the hospital for a follow-up appointment. On his way out, he encountered Claire, the nurse who had cared for him during his coma. "Mr. Blackwood," she exclaimed, smiling. "Good to see you up and about." "Please, call me Nathan," he responded, returning the smile. "Actually, I wanted to thank you for everything you did for me while I was hospitalized." Claire blushed slightly. "I was just doing my job." "No," Nathan insisted. "It was more than that. Your kindness, it made a difference." They chatted for a few minutes, and Nathan was surprised at how easy it was to talk to Claire. Before parting, he found himself saying, "Maybe we could grab a coffee sometime." "As friends, of course." Claire smiled. "I would like that." As Nathan drove home, he reflected on how his life was changing. New connections, old wounds healing. But there was one person who still occupied a special place in his thoughts, Nicole. They had met a few times since he left the hospital, always with the kids around. But Nathan could feel the tension between them, the unresolved feelings. Deciding to face the situation head-on, he called Nicole. "Hi, Nate," she answered, her voice soft. "Nicole, I was wondering if we could talk. Just the two of us." There was a pause on the other line. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Nate." "Please," he insisted. "There's so much I need to say." Finally, Nicole agreed to meet him at the park the next day. The following morning, before meeting Nicole, Nathan stopped at the cemetery. He hadn't visited his parents' graves in years, another thing he had neglected in his pursuit of success and wealth. Standing before the headstones, Nathan felt the weight of his choices more than ever. "Mom, Dad," he murmured, placing fresh flowers. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for forgetting everything you taught me. About family, about integrity." Tears streamed down Nathan's face as he continued. "You always said a man is defined not by how much money he has, but by the impact he makes on others' lives. I forgot that for so long. But I'm trying to make things right now. He stood there for a long time, reflecting on his parents' legacy and the legacy he wanted to leave for his own children. When he finally arrived at the park to meet Nicole, Nathan felt emotionally drained, but clearer and more determined than ever. Nicole was already there, sitting on a bench, the wind slightly tousling her hair. Nathan's heart sped up as he saw her, remembering all the moments they had shared. "Hi, Nicole," he said softly, sitting down beside her. "Hi, Nate," she responded, their eyes meeting. There was so much to say, so many years of hurt and love unresolved. But in that moment, sitting side by side in the park where they had met so many years ago, Nathan felt a spark of hope. The path to redemption would be long and hard, he knew that. But looking at Nicole, remembering his children, his parents, Nathan knew he was on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly at peace. A year had passed since the accident that changed everything. The Blackwood mansion, once cold and impersonal, was now warmed with the aroma of roasted turkey and the sound of familiar laughter. It was Thanksgiving, and for the first time in years, the whole family was gathered. Nathan stood in the kitchen, watching the scene with a mix of gratitude and astonishment. Emily was helping Nicole with the final dinner preparations, while Matthew and Claire, now a close family friend, were setting the table. "Need any help?" Nathan asked, approaching Nicole. She smiled, a sparkle in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. "I think we've got everything under control. But thanks, Nate." The use of the nickname didn't go unnoticed. In recent months, Nathan and Nicole had reconnected, rediscovering the friendship and affection that had initially brought them together. It wasn't easy, there were many wounds to heal, but both were willing to try. As everyone sat down at the table, Nathan looked around, his heart brimming with emotion. Emily, now graduated and starting her career, was openly smiling. Matthew, though still reserved, no longer had that anger in his eyes. "Before we start," Nathan said, standing up, "I'd like to say a few words. This past year has been a journey. For all of us. I've made many mistakes, hurt people I love. But I'm thankful for this second chance. Thankful that you didn't give up on me." Tears glistened in Nicole's eyes. Matthew, surprising everyone, spoke first. "It wasn't easy for us either, Dad. But I'm glad we're all here." Emily nodded, taking her brother's hand. "We're a family. Through all the ups and downs." As the meal proceeded, Nathan reflected on how much his priorities had shifted. The empire that once seemed so important was now secondary. The real treasure was right there, around that table. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Nathan and Nicole stayed on the porch, watching the stars. "Do you think we have a chance?" Nathan asked softly. "Us?" Nicole turned to him, her eyes reflecting years of shared history. "I think we've already proven that second chances are possible, haven't we?" As the night wore on, Nathan felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he faced it with hope and gratitude. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our exciting stories. Share with your friends so they can be moved too, and let us know what you think in the comments. We want to hear your opinions and suggestions to continue bringing content that touches the heart.